You know, when you look at a massive skyscraper going up in the middle of a city, you inherently trust the blueprint. Right.
Sure, yeah.
You see the steel beams, the foundation being poured, and there's this unspoken assumption that, well, the architects actually did the math, the building is going to stand.
Right, you'd hope so.
But if you look at modern Hollywood right now, specifically this attempt to build these sprawling, interconnected cinematic universes, it feels like they just threw out the blueprint halfway through construction.
Yeah.
We are literally watching a foundational landscape collapse in real time.
I mean, the structural integrity is completely compromised at this point. And today, we are focusing our lens squarely on the release of the new Supergirl movie.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a standard movie review, right? We're looking at a really fascinating, almost unprecedented wave of online commentary, some frankly dismal box office numbers, and a massive cultural debate over who ultimately bears the responsibility when a blockbuster of this scale just fundamentally fails to connect with audiences.
Exactly. And we've spent the week going through a huge mountain of industry data, financial tracking, and some highly critical breakdowns online to get you the complete picture of this drama.
Right.
Our mission for this deep dive is to examine the anatomy of a cinematic disaster without you having to actually, buy a ticket and suffer through it yourself.
To save you the time and the money.
Exactly. And we're going to impartially map out the severe backlash this film is getting. Not to validate any toxic corners of the internet, but just to understand the mechanics of why audiences are completely rejecting a movie that was supposed to anchor a massive new franchise.
Right. And stripping away all the subjective arguments about art and style is probably the best way to begin here. Let's just look at the objective financial realities.
Do it.
Because the box office data tells a story that literally no amount of studio marketing can spin.
Okay, let's unpack this because the numbers are just brutal.
Yeah, they are.
The film currently sits at roughly an $89 million worldwide gross. And industry analysts are projecting it's going to cap out at around maybe $150 million globally.
Wow.
Which, put that in perspective for a second. Commentators everywhere are pointing out that this performance is actually worse than the heavily mocked film Morbius.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. Morbius managed to stagger past the $160 million mark.
That specific comparison really highlights the gravity of the failure, I think. I mean, Morbius was largely considered this fringe character that just turned into a massive internet meme.
Right. It was Goke.
Exactly. But Supergirl, on the other hand, she carries the weight of the Superman family legacy. That is one of the most recognizable brands in global pop culture.
Yeah, that's a household name.
So failing to clear a bar set by a meme movie, it indicates a total brand disconnect. But honestly, the daily box office drops reveal the real mechanism of this collapse.
Yeah, the Friday to Friday domestic drop-off is genuinely shocking to look at. We're looking at a $10.4 million opening Friday. And that actually includes those inflated Thursday night preview numbers.
Right.
And then it just plunges down to just $3.6 million on its second Friday.
Ouch.
Yeah. That is an 80% drop. It's like throwing an incredibly lavish, super expensive wedding reception, and 80% of your guests quietly sneak out the back door before the cake is even cut.
That's a great analogy.
So what does this all mean for the film's word of mouth?
Well, a drop that steep almost always indicates toxic word of mouth. And the audience polling just backs that up immediately. The film received a B CinemaScore from its opening night crowds.
Wow. A B for a superhero movie.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, a B CinemaScore for this genre is basically a death knell.
It gets graded on a curve, right?
Exactly. We know that Metric polls the absolute most forgiving opening night diehards. Like, the people who bought tickets weeks in advance because they desperately wanted to love it.
The superfans.
Right, so a B isn't just a passing grade. It's those loyalists actively rejecting the film and going out and telling everyone they know to save their money.
Man. Well, knowing the audiences are rejecting it that hard, we have to move into why they're leaving the theaters. And the online commentary overwhelmingly points to just mechanical failures in the script.
Yeah, the structural stuff.
Exactly. Reviewers are aggressively criticizing the plot for being entirely derivative. Like they're describing it as this Frankenstein monster of other successful movies.
How so? Like, what are they comparing it to?
Well, critics are calling it a blatant mashup. They note it's trying to lift the emotional stakes of Guardians of the Galaxy by centering the whole plot on saving an injured animal.
Okay, sure.
And then it's attempting to borrow the visual aesthetic of Mad Max with all these sweeping, gritty desert wastelands.
Right.
And it wants the relentless pacing of a John Wick revenge thriller on top of that.
That is a lot to cram into one movie.
It is, but borrowing aesthetics doesn't work if you don't understand the emotional engine driving those original films.
No. You're hitting on a really crucial screenwriting concept there. Those films work because of cause and effect storytelling. It's what writers often call the therefore or but method.
Oh, well.
Like a character makes a decision, therefore a consequence happens, but a new complication arises. It creates this chain of escalating tension that's driven entirely by character agency.
Makes sense.
But the commentators highlight that the Supergirl script relies really heavily on and then storytelling instead.
Yes. The and then flaw is everywhere in these critiques. It's that feeling of watching someone play a video game on easy mode, where a series of unconnected events just happen to the protagonist purely for the convenience of moving the plot to the next location.
Right. It feels artificial.
Completely. Let's look at the inciting incident with Supergirl's dog, Krypto. The movie introduces this ruthless, psychopathic villain who is shown literally incinerating entire families.
There's absolute overkill.
Exactly. But then when he faces Krypto, he inexplicably decides to shoot the dog with a slow-acting poison dart instead of just killing him.
Oh, come on.
I know. And that choice forces this completely artificial 3-day ticking clock into the narrative.
Right, because the villain doesn't use a poison dart because it aligns with his established ruthless character. He uses it solely because the script needs Supergirl to have a timed mission.
Exactly.
And I assume the contrivances compound from there.
Oh, it gets worse. Reviewers note that this same villain miraculously carries the exact, highly specific antidote for this poison on his person at all times.
Of course he does.
Which provides a very convenient way for the hero to save the day if she just catches him. It completely shatters any suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, that's just lazy.
But here's where the mechanics of the script truly fall apart, according to the breakdowns. They establish this frantic 3-day deadline to save her dog, right? The tension is supposedly at its peak.
Okay.
Then, Supergirl lands on a planet with a green sun, which immediately strips her of her superpowers.
Oh, a classic Superman trope.
Right. And in a well-written script, this is where the hero uses their wits. They show us who they are, without their powers, to overcome a massive obstacle.
Right, it forces character growth.
But instead, she just waits.
Wait, what?
She literally sits around waiting for a yellow sun to rise so her powers can return.
You're kidding. That's how they resolve it.
Yes. She just hangs out until the weather changes. I mean, isn't that like pausing a ticking time bomb because you want to take a nap?
Yeah.
And just trusting the timer will freeze until you wake up?
That is exactly what it is. And releasing the pressure of a ticking clock by relying on an environmental weather change is resolved by the environment rather than the protagonist's ingenuity. The audience subconsciously registers that the danger just isn't real. The immersion breaks because the script is essentially telling the viewer that the universe will just conveniently solve the hero's problems for them.
Yeah, and if the plot mechanics are this fundamentally broken, you'd usually hope a charismatic lead can mask the damage by pure force of personality, right?
Sure, like Robert Downey Jr. in early Marvel movies.
Exactly. But here, the characters seem to be actively making the structural damage worse.
Yeah, critics are saying the characters are functioning more as hollow set dressing rather than active drivers of the narrative. The protagonist, played by Millie Alcock, is taking severe criticism for lacking a cohesive moral center or really any recognizable hero's journey.
Yeah, we see her introduced in this cycle of heavy, destructive partying. And look, a flawed hero can be fantastic. We love a redemption arc.
Absolutely.
But her subsequent moral choices throughout the runtime are just baffling the critics. There's this specific subplot where she goes out of her way to stop a young girl named Ruthie from getting revenge on the villain. Supergirl is just determined to keep this kid's hands clean.
Which is a classic trope, but I'm guessing the execution is where the friction lies.
The execution is disastrous.
Okay.
Because in her effort to stop Ruthie from taking a life, Supergirl inadvertently allows an innocent couple to be brutally murdered right in front of them.
Oh.
Yeah. The cognitive dissonance for the audience is massive.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the film, she just returns to Earth to settle down, claiming it as her home. Commentators are very quick to point out that she never actually earned that revelation.
Right.
Nothing in her chaotic journey organically led to that decision.
And you have to consider the psychological toll that takes on an actor's performance, too. When a script fails to provide a logical internal motivation for a character's choices, the actor is just left stranded.
Yeah, they have nothing to work with.
Right. They're forced to project deep emotion without any structural foundation. which is why a lot of the reviews are describing the performances as simultaneously forced and completely hollow. The actors don't know why they are doing what they are doing, and the audience can feel that confusion through the screen.
Yeah, and the protagonist is hollow, but the antagonist, named Krem, somehow lowers the bar even further.
Oh, yeah.
He's universally panned as a one-dimensional caricature. His grand, evil master plan is to capture brides to maintain a quote-unquote male-only race.
The biological absurdity of that motivation has become a massive talking point online.
I mean, how does that even work?
It doesn't. Even within the flexible rules of a comic book sci-fi universe, a male-only race requiring brides fundamentally contradicts its own premise.
That makes zero sense, and his actions continuously contradict whatever bizarre goals he supposedly has anyway.
Right.
Like he slaughters Ruthie's entire family, but inexplicably leaves the young girl alive. He doesn't take her captive. He doesn't eliminate her as a witness. He just leaves.
Just walks away.
Yeah. Only to then spend the rest of the movie relentlessly trying to hunt her down and capture her.
See, we're right back to and then storytelling. He leaves her alive purely because the script dictates that Ruthie must survive to meet Supergirl in the next act.
Exactly.
And then he hunts her later solely because the script requires a physical conflict in the third act. There is no internal consistency to his malice. And, when you have a plot relying on coincidence and characters completely devoid of logical motivation, filmmakers often resort to heavy-handed stylistic distractions.
Oh, and this brings us to a major point of contention dominating the commentary right now. The stylistic choices of the film's producer, James Gunn.
Ah, yes.
The critics have actually coined a term for these recurring elements. They call them Gunnisms.
Gunnisms, wow.
Yeah, and they're arguing that these auteur quirks have morphed from artistic signatures into just desperate crutches.
Well, what's fascinating here is that when an auteur has a recognizable style, think of Quentin Tarantino's kinetic dialogue or Edgar Wright's rhythmic editing, it usually serves to elevate a solid narrative.
Right, it adds to it.
But when applied to a broken foundation, those same signatures become glaringly obvious.
Definitely. And the breakdowns list these crutches meticulously. We get the mandated slow-motion fight scenes featuring a protagonist who looks vaguely confused. We have the obligatory cute furry animal sidekick serving as emotional manipulation. We have the hero dramatically wearing a long trench coat, seemingly just for style points. And most aggressively, we have the wildly out-of-place retro pop needle drops.
Yeah, the audiovisual dissonance of the soundtrack is drawing some of the absolute loudest criticism online.
Reviewers are hyper-fixating on the climax of the film, where a female acoustic cover of Jimmy Eat World's song The Middle is blasted over the action.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, I'm serious. And they argue it completely obliterates the tone of the scene. It's supposed to be this high-stakes, emotional peak, and instead, it just feels like a forced attempt to manufacture a cool, ironic vibe.
Yeah.
If a superhero is partying, morally inconsistent, and lacks a core drive, are we supposed to root for her just because she's wearing a trench coat while Jimmy Eat World plays? Is style completely replacing substance here?
That perfectly illustrates the core accusation being leveled by the critics. The audience just refuses to root for a hollow character just because she looks cool in a trench coat while a 2000s pop punk anthem plays.
Right.
At a certain point, the stylistic flourishes stop feeling like art and start feeling like an insult to the viewer's intelligence.
Which catapults us right into the final and honestly most fascinating part of this deep dive. Because when a blockbuster fails this spectacularly in front of the whole world, the Hollywood machine immediately shifts into full damage control.
Naturally.
And the blame game behind the scenes right now is incredibly revealing.
Oh, the industry's attempt to control the narrative often exposes the deep-seated anxieties of modern Hollywood. We are seeing major media outlets and industry trades attempt to explain away this box office disaster by floating the idea of competing cuts and citing these vague, creative differences.
Yeah, the specific narrative being pushed is that there was an alternative version of the film. They're calling it the Gillespie version.
Right.
And the trades are making a point to mention that this cut was exactly 11 minutes longer and featured more scenes exploring the villain, Krem. The blatant implication is that if the studio had simply released this slightly longer cut, the movie would have been a massive success.
See, the Phantom Cut is a classic, deeply ingrained studio defense mechanism.
Well, for sure.
It operates as a psychological coping strategy for an industry that is just terrified that its core formula is breaking. By leaking the existence of an alternative cut, Executives try to establish a narrative that the film was actually brilliant at some point, but was tragically ruined by compromises in the editing bay.
Right, right.
It diffuses the blame away from the foundational script and
Mhm.
pushes it onto this abstract post-production process.
But the audience isn't buying it anymore. The online critics are completely rejecting this defense, like practically laughing it out of the room.
Yeah.
They point out that the theatrical version was nearly 2 hours of structural boredom.
Yeah.
As commentators noted, the villain's only defining character trait, aside from his absurd biological plan, was showing up to sporadically steal people's food and eat it.
Exactly. And adding 11 more minutes of a poorly written villain eating food doesn't repair the structural integrity of the narrative. It just prolongs the execution.
Exactly. And critics are dropping the ultimate hammer on this spin by bringing the receipts.
Oh.
Yeah, they're pulling up direct public quotes from Gunn himself, made long before the movie released. Gunn explicitly stated on the record that he and Peter Safran are the heads of the studio. He bragged that the only studio interference would come directly from them. There was no faceless executive in a corporate suit demanding last-minute changes. They had total, unmitigated creative control.
Wow. Well, this specific dynamic short-circuits the entire ecosystem of modern film discourse.
So?
Well, for decades, film fans have reflexively rallied behind creatives, right? When a highly anticipated movie fails, the default instinct is to blame the studio.
Oh yeah, always.
Studio interference has served as the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for directors and writers.
Like, the entire Release the Snyder Cut movement was built on the exact premise that corporate suits ruins an artist's pure vision.
Exactly the same principle. But in this unique situation, the artist is the corporate suit. The traditional excuse just vanishes overnight.
Yeah.
When you hold all the keys, write the checks, and dictate the creative direction, you're entirely exposed to the audience's rejection. There is no boogeyman left to blame.
It's like a head chef who owns the restaurant, wrote the menu, sourced all the ingredients, and cooked the meal themselves.
Right.
If they serve you a steak burned to a crisp, they can't suddenly claim the meal would have been a masterpiece if only they had given you a slightly larger side of mashed potatoes. The buck has to stop with the chef.
And that inability to shift the blame is exactly why the online backlash is so severe and sustained. The commentators aren't just reacting to a poorly made movie, they are reacting to a perceived abdication of accountability.
Absolutely.
When a film with a massive budget, immense marketing, and a legacy fan base suffers an 80% drop in its second weekend, it is a definitive message from the consumer that the product is broken at its core. Attempting to spin that level of rejection as a minor editing dispute feels incredibly insulting to the audience's intelligence.
It really treats the audience like they don't understand how movies work. So if we pull all these threads together, the picture is incredibly stark. We're looking at a superhero blockbuster that suffered a historic box office collapse, actively driven away by the very loyalists who showed up on opening night.
We've tracked how the highly criticized and then storytelling mechanics, using those slow-acting poison darts and conveniently timed green suns, just replaced genuine character challenges with lazy plot contrivances.
Yeah, and we analyzed how fundamentally hollow characters, paired with a villain whose motivations defied basic logic, forced the production to lean heavily on stylistic crutches. Those recognizable auteur quirks and retro pop needle drops were deployed to mask the absence of a real narrative engine.
And we explored how the audience is forcefully rejecting the industry's attempt at damage control, holding the lead creatives entirely accountable because they operated with absolute self-professed freedom from executive interference.
It is a masterclass in how not to build a cinematic universe.
Yeah.
And really a grim case study in the rapid erosion of audience trust. For you listening right now, I want you to think about your own favorite cinematic franchises. Think about the movies you defend. How often do you find yourself forgiving a messy, structurally flawed story just because it throws in a few cool stylistic moments or a great soundtrack?
Good question.
And more importantly, where is your breaking point? When do you sit in the theater and finally say, you know what, a cool trench coat and a pop song aren't enough to save this?
Based on the data we are seeing, the broader superhero audience has firmly located their breaking point.
They absolutely have. Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We have spent years in pop culture circles hearing that studio interference is the ultimate enemy of good art. We demand that creatives be let off the leash.
Right.
But if total creative freedom, with absolutely zero executive pushback to stress test these scripts, results in a product that audiences fundamentally reject, Does the modern blockbuster system actually need that executive friction to survive? Are those corporate suits the necessary villains that actually keep the story structurally sound? Or is the superhero genre simply evolving past what these sprawling, disconnected cinematic universes can even offer anymore? Maybe that pristine, rigid skyscraper blueprint was there for a very good reason.
Because a building of that size will never stand on style alone.
It's going to collapse every single time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the numbers, the script mechanics, and the spin. We will catch you on the next one.